For most of human history, nobody had a job. There were no offices, no schedules, no bosses, no clocks. And yet, the humans who lived this way built the most sophisticated stone monuments on Earth, invented music, created art that still moves us today, and somehow found the time to map the stars. The question is not how they survived without work. The question is whether they were doing something far more important than anything we do now. For a very long time, scientists and historians assumed that life before farming was pure misery. They imagined ancient humans stumbling through forests, half-starved, spending every waking moment desperately searching for their next meal. The story went like this. Life was short, brutal, exhausting, and mostly pointless. This idea became so common that people stopped questioning it. Then the research started catching up with reality. In 1966, an anthropologist named Marshall Solons stood up at a conference in Chicago and said something that shocked the room. He argued, based on actual fieldwork and evidence gathered from hunter-gatherer societies still living traditional lifestyles, that ancient humans were not struggling at all. He called them the original affluent society. Not wealthy in money, but wealthy in something far more valuable: time. Solons calculated, drawing on studies by researchers like Richard Lee, who had spent years living with the San people of the Kalahari Desert in southern Africa, that hunter-gatherers worked roughly 2 to 4 hours a day to meet all their food and survival needs. Not 10 hours, not 8 hours, 2 to 4 hours. Then they stopped, and the rest of the day was theirs. Richard Lee published his detailed research in 1968 in a paper titled What Hunters Do for a Living. He had counted every hour the San people spent gathering food, preparing it, and maintaining their tools and shelters. The numbers were undeniable. These people were not working themselves to exhaustion. They were thriving on a schedule that would make a modern office worker weep with envy. But here's where it gets unsettling. The San people, whose lifestyle gives us a window into how ancient humans may have lived, were not surviving on poor or limited food. Their diet, as Lee documented, was extraordinarily varied and nutritionally rich. They ate over 100 different plant species. They understood which roots held water, which berries were ripe in which season, and which plants could treat infection or reduce fever. Their knowledge of the natural world was so deep and so precise that modern ethnobotanists, scientists who study how human cultures use plants, have spent decades trying to record even a fraction of it before it disappears. Skeletal remains support this picture too. Anthropologist Clark Spencer Larson, who has spent his career studying ancient human bones, found that the skeletons of pre-agricultural hunter-gatherers were generally larger, stronger, and showed fewer signs of disease and nutritional deficiency than the skeletons of the early farmers who came after them. When humans switched to farming around 10,000 years before Christ, they actually got shorter, sicker, and showed more signs of back and joint stress from repetitive labor. Farming did not immediately improve human health. In many measurable ways, it made life harder. This is where the story becomes genuinely extraordinary. The evidence scattered across ancient sites on every continent tells us that when ancient humans were not gathering food or tending to survival, they were doing things we would recognize immediately. They were making music. They were telling stories. They were painting. They were playing. They were conducting rituals. They were watching the sky. The oldest confirmed musical instruments ever found are bone flutes discovered in caves in Germany, in a region called Swabia. The oldest of these flutes, made from the wing bone of a griffin vulture, was found at a site called Holle Fels and dates to at least 40,000 years ago. It has 5 finger holes. It produces a scale of notes that researchers, including Professor Nicholas Conard of the University of Tübingen, who led the excavation, confirmed is deliberately tuned. Someone 40,000 years ago was not just banging rocks together. They were composing. The cave paintings at Lascaux in France, dated to approximately 17,000 years before Christ, are not crude scrawlings. They are masterworks. Animals are painted in motion, with perspective and depth, using multiple colors ground from minerals. Some figures are painted in positions that only make sense if the artist understood how a body moves at different speeds. Archaeologist and cave art specialist Jean Klotz spent decades studying these paintings and concluded they represent a sophisticated visual language. not random decoration. People planned these paintings. They mixed their pigments carefully. They returned to the same walls over generations. But here's where it gets unsettling. Many of these paintings are in the deepest, most difficult to reach chambers of the caves, not near the entrance where firelight was good and the air was breathable. Deep inside, where you have to crawl through narrow passages in complete darkness to reach them. Researcher and archaeologist Stephen Mythen, in his book The Prehistory of the Mind, argues that this placement was deliberate, that the effort of reaching the paintings was part of their purpose. These were not decorations. They were destinations. Ancient humans were also scientists, even if we resist calling them that. The site of Gozek in Germany contains a circular arrangement of ditches and wooden posts built around 4,900 years before Christ. Archaeoastronomer Wolfhard Schlosser analyzed the structure and confirmed that its gates align precisely with sunrise and sunset on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year. This was not accidental. Building the structure required observation of the sky over many years, the recording of that information somehow, and the ability to translate it into physical architecture. This is the same process a modern scientist uses. Observe, record, apply. Stonehenge, in England, begun around 5,000 years before Christ in its earliest form, does the same thing on a grander scale. Archaeoastronomer Gerald Hawkins published a detailed analysis in 1965 showing that dozens of Stonehenge's alignments correspond to significant solar and lunar events throughout the year. People with no writing, no metal tools, and no formal institutions of learning were tracking the movements of celestial bodies across decades and centuries. They were doing this because it mattered. Knowing when seasons would change meant knowing when to move, when rivers would flood, when certain animals would appear. Watching the sky was not mysticism. It was practical knowledge built on patient, long-term observation. Anthropologist David Graeber, who researched and wrote extensively about the origins of work and human social organization before his death in 2020, argued something profound. He suggested that the elaborate rituals, storytelling traditions, and social ceremonies of ancient hunter-gatherers were not a distraction from survival. They were the engine of survival. Shared stories created shared identity. Shared identity meant people trusted each other. Trust meant people would share food during a bad season, carry a sick member of the group, or remember the location of a water source 3 days walk away and share that information when it was needed. The time ancient humans spent doing things that looked like play or ritual was actually the time they spent building the invisible structures that held communities together. This is not a theory invented to make ancient people seem more interesting. It is a conclusion drawn from decades of anthropological fieldwork by researchers like Robin Dunbar, whose work on social group sizes in primates and humans showed that maintaining complex social bonds requires a massive investment of time and attention. Here is what this means for us today, and it is a conclusion most people are not comfortable sitting with. We built an entire civilization on the assumption that human beings need to be kept busy, that if people are not working, they will fall apart, cause trouble, or waste their potential. Every institution we have, from schools that run on rigid schedules to economies that measure human value in hours of labor, is built on this assumption, and the assumption is wrong. The evidence from archaeology, anthropology, and the study of surviving hunter-gatherer cultures tells a different story. The humans who had the most free time produced art that lasts 40,000 years. They built observatories aligned with the movements of stars. They developed medical knowledge so precise that modern pharmaceutical companies still investigate it. They created social bonds strong enough to maintain communities across thousands of years without police forces, governments, or legal systems. We did not become more creative, more connected, or more wise when we started working longer hours. In measurable physical terms, we became smaller and sicker. What we gained in food security and population growth, we paid for in time, health, and something harder to measure but plainly visible in the archaeological record: the profound, unhurried freedom to pay attention to the world. The buried question underneath all of this is simple and a little devastating. Ancient humans had something we have spent 10,000 years engineering away, and we call that progress.